Oh yeah, dude, totally.
There are a lot of great games for the Nintendo DS, like Shrek, Ogres and Dronkies, or Russell Grant's Astrology. But one game series that always stuck out to me as a Nintendo DS classic was Call of Duty. I mean, everybody remembers hopping into a zombies game or riding in the car to their grandma's house on Black Ops for the DS, right? Right? Everybody remembers that? No? Well, I do. Now this was not my introduction to Call of Duty. Me and my brother had played the games on the PS2 and 3 before that, which is probably why my mom bought my brother, and by extension me, Call of Duty Black Ops for the Nintendo DS. I remember liking it, although I couldn't wrap my little head around why this version was so different from the one I played on the PS3. You know, I had no concept of hardware limitations at the time. The one thing I remember the most about Black Ops for the DS was that the controls were horrible, like ungodly bad. We also had Modern Warfare 3 for the DS, which I remember having marginally better controls, but besides that I didn't play it as much. What I didn't know is that there were actually 5 DS Call of Duty games, and in this video I want to revisit these weird ports of the, at the time, beloved franchise to see if they were actually any good. At the time of writing this, I have not yet replayed any of these games, so let me try to remember everything I can before going in. First of all, the stories of the campaigns were completely unique and nothing at all like the actual games. The controls were horrible. In Black Ops, I think the only way you could look around was by using the stylus and dragging it around the bottom screen, which if you were a game developer seems like it would be just like using a mouse, but if you actually play it like that, it was horrible. I think they changed it in Modern Warfare 3 though. I also remember in Zombies you could actually shoot the power-ups to collect them, which I thought was a goated feature, and I still don't understand why they haven't put that in the mainline games, but that's about it. So join me in this journey of rediscovery. Maybe they'll be good, maybe they won't, or maybe I'll have a stroke and die before I can finish this video, who can say? Before we get into it, I'm only really going to talk about the campaigns for these games, and the zombies for the one game that has that, mainly because I don't have like 6 friends willing to hop on COD for the DS with me to try out the multiplayer. If you are willing, hit me up I guess. Anyway, COD 4 Modern Warfare for the DS came out in 2007, and right off the bat I want to say that this game is kind of impressive for what it is. Like it is in fact a recognizably Call of Duty first-person shooter game for the Nintendo DS. Like that's kind of cool, isn't it? That such a thing exists? However, this game is in no discernible way like the actual COD 4 Modern Warfare for the PS3 or Xbox, like not even close. The campaign is completely different. There's not even any of the recognizable characters like Price or Soap in this game, and if I remember right, it's like that for all of these DS ports. Honestly, port isn't the right word. This is just a whole other game that they decided to market as a DS version of the mainline Call of Duty game. Now, do you remember that control scheme I mentioned earlier? Well, this game created it. Now, I didn't play this on the actual DS, I emulated it, and even then the controls literally gave me carpal tunnel. So on the DS, you would have been able to move around with a D-pad, pretty normal, and then have to look around using the bottom touchscreen, preferably with a stylus since that always worked better than your finger did on the DS screen. To shoot, you had to press L or R on the DS, which means that to play this game, you would have to have one hand holding your DS and one hand devoted completely to moving around the bottom screen so you can look around. That's fucking horrible, man. I can't believe anybody actually playtested this game and was like, yeah, that works. Now for me, emulating it on my pewter, I moved with WASD, shot with E or Q, and looked around by holding down left click and dragging my mouse around the bottom screen. Also pretty horrible, but one problem I kept running into was that my mouse would go off screen before I could turn all the way around, which makes sense because I'm playing on this tiny little display. However, imagine that you're on the DS. You'd be getting shot from behind, frantically dragging your stylus around the screen to have your guy look behind him only for one full drag across the screen to not be enough to turn you all the way around. Like, what the hell, man? Now, I've played quite a few games with diabolical control schemes on this channel, like Batman and Robin or Metal Gear Solid Portable Ops, but this one has gotta be the worst. Anyway, the controls are not the only thing to complain about in this game. I want to reiterate, it's cool that this game exists and that they got a first-person shooter on the DS. However, this game runs so horribly. Obviously, I'm emulating it, but usually that means better performance with old games. With MWDS, we're talking like single-digit frame rates at times. Like, it would get so slow sometimes that you could literally see the enemy skipping frames ahead of you. The only thing is, I honestly don't know what they could have done differently to avoid this. Like, this game already looks super basic. I think it's just a byproduct of running a full 3D video game on the Nintendo double screen. MW is also very buggy, but never in a game-breaking way, just like in an annoying way. Like, you should almost never try to take cover in this game because enemies will just shoot through it. The way they compensate for this is by giving you a stupid amount of health, which does come in handy in normal gunfights, but this game also loves to one-shot you. The worst example of this is with melee. Now this used to be a staple of COD games that melee would one-shot you, and as such if you get close enough to an enemy in this game, you can one-shot melee them. However, my friend, they can do the exact same to you, and this game is weirdly realistic with its death scenes, in the sense that you just die, like there's no fanfare, you don't hear the voices of your comrades fading away in the background. If you die, you just fall over and the world goes black. Oftentimes you don't even hear the sound of the gunshot that killed you. Of course that's probably just a technical thing, but I like reading into it like it was intentional. Melee isn't the only one-shot though. There's a couple times where you're up against snipers who insta-kill you the second you pop into their line of sight. Likewise, the last couple of missions have these shotgunners who hide around corners and will clap you in a millisecond if you let them. There's also more kind of environmental ones like getting caught in a falling bridge or stepping into the view of a tank. Now it's not like this game is stingy with the checkpoints, they're about as frequent as they should be, but I think when playing a game causes... But I think when you're playing a game that causes the human soul this much suffering, they should have been a little more generous. Beyond the controls and the general bugginess, the gunplay is actually decent. Hit registration is actually pretty good, aside from when the enemies are behind invisible cover, but it'd be like that sometimes. Once you get to the end of the game, the enemies take a shitload of body shots to kill out of nowhere, but one headshot will always kill them, so you end up having to get kinda good at aiming to succeed. Because this game came out in 2007, it does have the dreaded 2000/2010s turret section. However, unlike most games that have like one or two of these, basically every other mission in Modern Warfare DS is a turret mission. If you somehow don't know what I'm talking about, they're basically like on-rails shooter section of games where you get driven around and have to fend off enemies with a mounted machine gun. In this game you do it with stationary machine guns, guns on the back of trucks, helicopter miniguns, and even an AC-130 mission, which is also a COD staple. I think the reason why they included so many of these is because the turret sections are far and away the most functional parts of this game. Like the controls aren't so bad when you don't have to worry about moving around and can just aim at enemies. There's really no challenge with these missions though, like you have an ungodly amount of health, which is usually why most games only have like one of these. Having this many makes them get super boring super quickly. Now before we discuss the amazing story of this fine video game, I should say there's only like maybe 6 guns you can find in this game. You start every mission with either an M4 or an MP5 based on whether you're British or not, and can then loot an AK, Uzi, shotgun, or sniper from enemies. You also have a secondary, but it's kinda trash, so I never used it. That's all in addition to being able to throw grenades and call in airstrikes like 3 times throughout the game. I will say though, the AC-130 mission, which are almost always boring as hell, was still boring as hell, but it was unique in that you couldn't just glass the entire landscape like you usually can in Call of Duty. You could only destroy approved buildings. Right, so the story. Forget Price, Zakayev, Soap, Makarov, Shepard, all those blokes from the old series. Here we got Nameless Marine 1 and Snowman. Nameless Marine is a Marine and Snowman is an SAS bloke. And together they team up to stop a Middle Eastern dictator from colluding with a Russian rebel to launch a nuke at an unknown target. Now I will say this, although this doesn't apply just to this game, every old COD game did this. I don't like how modern Call of Duty is too scared to actually use real countries in them and shit. Like the final straw for me was, I think either the new Modern Warfare 2 or 3, where you spend almost the entire game either fighting mercenaries or fighting people in a fictional country. Like, have some balls, man. The original Modern Warfares had Russia launching a ground invasion of the US, and Black Ops literally used real people in them, like Castro and Savimbi. But you can't give this game too many props because the Russian guy is like a rebel who's trying to restore the Soviet Union, so they still didn't want to offend anybody too much. Anyway, there's no cutscenes or anything, just little pre-mission briefings, but the story is pretty basic anyway. The Middle Eastern guy attacks a US Marine base, causing the Marines to launch a counterattack. Meanwhile, the SAS find evidence that the Russian guy absconded with a nuke. So they track him down only to learn that he already gave it to the Middle Eastern guy, who launches it only for the SAS to detonate it mid-air, then the Marines capture the dictator and boom, we win. I think you only ever see the 2 villains in the opening cutscene, so you really don't know what the hell you're fighting for most of the time, which is also strangely realistic to the soldier's experience. Anyway, this game is pretty trash, but in a very understandable and forgivable way, and in a way that I think a lot of kids wouldn't have minded too much. Let's move on. World at War for the DS was the next one they made for the DS, obviously. World at War for the DS was the next one they adapted, releasing in 2008, and this game, despite somehow having an even more blasphemous control scheme than Modern Warfare, is actually pretty good. Like, I actually had a lot of fun playing this game, at least for a while. The biggest complaint I have with this game is that it way overstays its welcome, and keeps going far beyond the point where it was actually fun. But we'll get into all that in a minute. For now, let's talk about what this game does right. So the controls are kind of weird because in one way they improve the biggest issue with Modern Warfare, that being your inability to move the camera at anything faster than a leisurely pace. And they fix that. You can actually whip that thing around in this game and catch enemies around corners before they stab you in the gut, which is great. The catch is that they way overcompensated by making the ADS sensitivity insanely low. Like, it genuinely takes like 4 full travels across the bottom screen to even make a 90-degree turn. Of course, the upside of this is that you can be very precise and deliberate with your aiming, but the downside is it's basically impossible to turn quick enough to catch an enemy out of sight without unaiming first. All in all though, I think it works a lot better than Modern Warfare's does. To compensate for this, they decided to actually give the guns recoil and bloom, which they basically didn't have in Modern Warfare. Of course, this is very realistic and great for my milsim Call of Duty on the DS experience, but it would make playing this game on an actual DS such a nightmare. So we already discussed the great and ergonomic way you have to hold a DS to play these games. However, now you not only have to use the stylus hand to look around, but also constantly drag the stylus downwards while shooting to compensate for recoil. It's pretty trash, but again, somehow better than the shooting in Modern Warfare. Anyway, now let's discuss what the game actually does right. One of the biggest improvements over Modern Warfare is that this game actually has weapon variety. Like, what a concept. Now, a lot of this comes down to necessity, like you play as 3 separate countries facing down 2 separate enemies, all of which would have different weapons, and it would be a little goofy if the Soviet Union pulled up to the function with M1 Garands. But it's not just visual differences, like the Thompson, Sten, and Papush all have different recoils, firing patterns, and mag size, as well as some favored factions, mainly the Americans, having more than just one gun. It actually makes the game fun when you don't use the exact same gun the entire time, although to Modern Warfare's credit, using an M4 the entire time was also historically accurate, so whatever. Anyway, far and away the biggest improvement is the alternate game modes, or whatever the fuck you call those. MW had 2 of these, those being turret sections and 1 AC-130 mission, as well as little mini-games you had to play to do things like disarm bombs. This game has a shitload of these. There certainly are turret sections, but there's also tank sections, AA guns, artillery, and mortars where you have to manually spin little wheels to line it up with your target, and best of all, the most fun mission in the game, and the most fun mission in any of these games, getting to fly around a bomber plane. I used to love this game for the Wii called World War II Aces, where you go to fly around planes like either fighters or bombers and just fuck shit up, like destroy the landscape. So this mission was such a throwback for me, even though it's nowhere near that game. This game has its own set of minigames, actually probably too many. You get to manually disarm mines. What the fuck? You get to manually disarm mines, send Morse code messages in a little rhythm game, patch up fallen comrades, and I think a couple more that I can't remember. Despite being on the same console as MW, World at War looks way better. Not necessarily graphics-wise, and it definitely doesn't run better, but they actually had an art direction this time. I do think a part of this is just the setting, but 1940s Germany genuinely looks like a fairy tale or something. Like, it's so vibrant and fun to look at, even when you're actively destroying it. Likewise, the last mission in the Pacific Theater has you raid this Japanese castle and it looks so fucking good. Not even just for a DS game, like it just looks good, period. This game is genuinely good, not just impressive as a concept like Modern Warfare was. However, as I mentioned earlier, it goes on for way too long. So for me, the absolute peak of the game was the bomber mission. It was so fun. Way better than the usual AC-130 mission you get in COD games. So here's the general structure of this game. You start out as an American in the Pacific, which has some fun moments but is pretty typical COD missions. You then play as British in Europe fighting Nazis, which is where you get the bomber mission. Then it's Russians in Europe where you get the tank mission. All of these mission groups are pretty fun, although I would rank them British, Russian, American. By the end of the Russian missions, I was still having fun with the game. We're about 3 hours in at this point, but I was ready to be done. I expected the next couple missions to wrap things up with a nice bow and I could go on my way, satisfied with the great Call of Duty game I had just played. So the thing about Call of Duty campaigns is the only real way you can keep someone interested for more than a few hours is with the story, because there's really only so many mission varieties you can include in these games. Like, you might have a couple stealth missions, a vehicle mission or two, maybe one where you don't have much combat and is more of a set piece, but the reason why you keep playing at the end of the day is to see how all of this ends. My favorite campaign is Black Ops, and the reason why it's my favorite is because watching the story unfold in this kind of non-linear way is so captivating, that at a certain point the gameplay is just a vessel for you getting more of the story. Likewise with a game like Modern Warfare 2, by the time Shepard betrays you, you've probably had your fill of the gameplay, but now you're glued to your seat to see how Task Force 141 is going to get their revenge on that fuck. Both of those campaigns are about 5 hours long, and you know what else is 5 hours long? Fucking World at War for the DS, except the difference here is that there basically isn't a story. You play as 3 completely disconnected random soldiers on different fronts of the war, just doing little missions to fight the Axis. You never really get attached to these characters to care enough whether they succeed or not, and it's not like there's any question on how this war is going to end, so the result is that the only way this game can really keep you engaged is through the gameplay, except there's really only so much they can do. Like, they can try another tank section, more air defense sections, and even a part where you have to man 2 turrets at once, but throughout all of it I was like, when is this shit going to end? In addition to that, they crank up the difficulty for each faction's second round of missions, making the previously fun but kinda challenging gameplay just suck ass. After the first round of American, British, and Russian missions, you then have a second round from each, returning you to the seat of all these characters you don't care about to watch them win their individual parts of the war. They also try to introduce weird new mechanics in the later half, like twice you can randomly command your squad mates to do something even though you could never do that before and also can't do it after. I will admit I haven't played the original World at War in like 12 years, but the thing about that game is that it does tell a compelling World War II story, with the most iconic being Reznov in the Siege of Stalingrad. This game does not do that, rather you just get teleported around Germany/Japan, destroying bunkers or whatever and getting pats on the back from your commander. The only section that achieves some kind of story is the British one, because the blokes you play as are the same that crashed out of the bomber you flew, but you still never learn anything about these guys or have any reason at all to be invested in their success. I don't know, man, I do want to stress this game is a massive improvement over Modern Warfare in the gameplay department, and in truth the campaign being overly long wouldn't really matter to the target demographic of this game, because unlike chuds like me who make YouTube videos, they could just put the game down if they don't feel like finishing it. But all in all, good game, just goes on for way too long. So, when it comes to Modern Warfare Mobilized, I have kind of mixed feelings on it. On one hand, this game has far and away the best gunplay and controls of the series so far. They took every improvement World at War made and fixed the one downgrade, that being the ADS speed, and basically perfected the formula. Or at least as perfect as it can be with this control scheme. There's also a ton of weapons in this game, like easily as many as you would see in a normal Call of Duty campaign. Likewise, the mission variety is about on par with what you'd see in a normal COD game. You have the normal shooter sections, a healthy dose of turret sections, a tank mission where you actually get to control the tank this time, another bomber mission, let's fucking go, and everybody's favorite, the AC-130 mission. The little minigames this time are decent too. The one that stood out to me the most is where you basically get to play Wordle, but with 3 numbers to defuse bombs. There's also like Rainbow Six drone sections, both of which are pretty fun. Like, it's a Call of Duty campaign, man, what can you really say? I mean, the story isn't anything special, it's actually kinda trash, but not in a way that makes you want to stop playing the game. Basically, to sum up this very complex story, a Middle Eastern baddie gets his hands on a nuke and you spend the entire game trying to take it from him. Like, literally every mission, aside from like 3, are just the Marines/SAS raiding a place where the bomb was taken to only to barely miss it, and then have to chase it to the next place. The exception are the 3 missions that happen when they lose track of the bomb and need to find an informant to tell them where it was taken, so they can then continue to chase the bomb around. At least the main characters are a little more defined in this one. The SAS captain is very much supposed to invoke Price from the mainline games, but yeah, it's honestly probably the most fun I've had with one of these games so far. You get to mess around with new guns almost every mission, even cool ones like LMGs and the AA-12, or even a randomly placed explosive crossbow. The bomber mission isn't quite as good as the World at War one, but it definitely had me hyped when I saw how they reused the general concept just without the ball turret. The AC-130 mission is just as boring as always, but what can you really expect from that? Yeah man, it's a perfectly serviceable Call of Duty campaign, I guess we'll just move on. Is what I would say if the devs of this game weren't so base and realism-pilled.
War never changes. Since the dawn of humankind, when our ancestors first discovered the killing of rock and bone.
I don't know about you guys, but my favorite gritty milsim is Call of Duty Modern Warfare Mobilized for the Nintendo double screen. This shit has you dying in like 3 shots from any enemy, which means that against mounted turrets you get shredded in about half a second. Likewise, when you get to drive your tank around, it's either shoot or be shot, brother, because your tank has exactly the same health as the enemy tanks. Meaning that if they get the first shot off on you, you might as well be fucked. No, but seriously, I have no idea why the devs decided to make this game so fucking hard all of a sudden. I even had to go back and watch my footage to make sure I didn't accidentally select veteran difficulty, which I didn't. I can't even imagine how that would have been. The easiest way to sum up the difficulty of this game is to say that in any given scenario, you have the exact same health as your enemies have. So if they die in 3 shots, so do you. And if their tank goes down in 2 hits, so does yours. And you know how quickly you get to mow down enemies anytime you hop on a turret? Now it's you getting mowed down in a split second, buddy. I won't lie though, the difficulty is actually pretty fun. Like Modern Warfare and World at War both cranked enemy health and damage towards the end of their campaigns, which sucked, but I honestly really liked the way this game did it. Like, I don't know why the devs decided to suddenly make the random spin-off game for the DS so based and reality-pilled, but I respect it. It's kind of funny though, because this kind of super slow tactical gameplay, like you might see in a game like Ready or Not, which also more or less has enemies be able to kill you just as quickly as you can kill them, really contradicts the usual Call of Duty campaign moments. COD campaigns love to have you facing down hordes of enemies, soloing tanks, taking down helicopters and all that shit, but that really doesn't work in a game where the tanks and helicopters can just end you with the press of a button. The worst and funniest offender of this happens right at the end when your guy has to pull an action movie moment and sprint down a hallway under a rapidly closing blast door.
Nice job, O'Neill. We can't reach this door.
Only to then immediately be gunned down by the guys on the other side. It honestly demands a level of mastery of this control scheme that I think you only could have achieved if you've been playing DS Call of Duty back to back every day like I have. Now, if either of the previous two games had difficulty like this, I would have either committed or scrapped this video. This is the first game in the series that actually has the gameplay chops to support difficulty like this. It was honestly pretty fun, man.
0, 11, 24, 11, 1, 7, 9.
Now, I mentioned at the top of this video that Black Ops and MW3 were the two DS COD games that I actually played back in the day, which is why I was the most excited for these two of all, but particularly Black Ops. Now, when it comes to Black Ops, you need to keep in mind that the real Call of Duty Black Ops is my favorite game in this series. It comes down to more than just the campaign for me. I mean, it turned zombies from a stupid little minigame to one of the core parts of the new Treyarch games, rewired all of our brain chemistries to look for number patterns where there are none, and I just really enjoy the general art style and gameplay of the game. These days, all COD games pretty much use the same engine, which Infinity Ward created, so they all kind of play like Infinity Ward COD does. But back in the day, there was a pretty distinct difference between the two studios and the way their games felt to play. Anyway, why am I saying all this when it has nothing to do with DS COD? Well, it's because this game has massive shoes to fill. You can't just call your game Black Ops and then put out some trash. There's a certain prestige to that name, so before we talk about the actual content of Black Ops DS, just know that I won't be as forgiving as I was to the innocent little Modern Warfares and World at War ports. So does it live up to the name? Well, it's kind of complicated. On the very surface level, no. In fact, I would say the campaign is significantly worse than Mobilized. However, this game is really ambitious in a way that almost none of the previous games were. Maybe World at War, but even then. It really tries, and I think in trying so hard it breaks the delicate balance that Mobilized walked with its combat system and difficulty. So let's start with that. I didn't really mention this in the Mobilized section, because before playing this game I didn't realize how important this was to how much fun I had with that game. Unlike the two games that came before it, your squad and MW Mobilized were actually really good. They not only held their own, which obviously they will, they're invincible, they would save your ass if an enemy caught you lacking. Of course, they wouldn't always be around to save you, but it happened just enough to where I noticed it and appreciated that it actually felt like I was working with elite operatives, not some blokes picked up from the local 7-Eleven. In Black Ops, that is not at all the case, despite that it retains all the difficulty of Mobilized and even makes it a little harder. Your squad in this game is basically useless outside of very specific, kind of scripted sections where they'll clear a room for you or something like that. They will almost never save you from enemies that catch you with your back turned, and in many cases, and this is literally the only game so far where this has happened, they would get in my way and stop me from getting to cover when enemies started shooting at me. It was like, what the fuck, man, and it happened very often. In general, if I had to sum up why the campaign of Black Ops is so much worse to me, it's a general lack of polish. Like, they basically just ported over their new fancy gameplay from Mobilized, but didn't put any of the work in to balance it and make it fun like they did with that game. The squad AI is a big part of that, given that you would basically have to design their AI level by level and decide where and when they should be places, which dictates who they'll shoot at and so on. But the biggest factor in how unfun this game can be at times is that they broke the main rule Mobilized put in place. That game said, you are always on equal footing with your enemy. If you die in 3 hits, they die in 3 hits, so all you have to do to beat this game is be better than them. In Black Ops, that's just not the case. You still die in 3 hits, but very often the enemies don't, sometimes taking anywhere from 5 to 8. A part of that is the new bleed out system they made, where sometimes when you do enough damage to an enemy, they'll get wounded on the ground and continue shooting at you. But that doesn't always happen, sometimes they just simply take more damage to kill than you do. This can still be accounted for if you're quick enough, however the game also loves to throw enemies at you from outside your vision, where they'll kill you before you can turn around. Or spawn them behind you, or drop 3 of them at once in front of you, which is impossible to deal with unless you somehow knew it was coming. Like, you literally cannot be caught scratching your gooch for a second in this game or you will die. Unless, like I said, you knew it was coming, which is how I think they justified this. Kinda like, whatever bitch, it's Call of Duty, you'll just respawn a minute or two ago and go at it again. Which is true, but doesn't change how frustrating it is to die of things outside of your control. Also, and this is also, as I've said many times now, based and realism pilled, but the guns in this game are significantly worse than those in Mobilized. Like, they're unwieldy, the iron sights suck, they're inaccurate, which is probably how it would feel if you went from modern 21st century guns to those of the 1960s, but this game isn't balanced around that. The enemies still laser you like they have M4s while you're stuck fumbling around with the horrific iron sights of the AK in this game. Also, this game finally introduces that alternate control scheme that I hyped up so much in the beginning, and I hate to admit it, but I actually switched back to the stylus mode. Now I know, all the shit I've been talking about it only to then pick it over the one I thought was better. But in my defense, I whipped out the old DS to make sure that I wasn't crazy, and indeed, the alternate control scheme is way better on that than trying to use the stylus. It was actually like kind of impossible for me to play using the stylus. My hands were too fat, I couldn't even see the bottom screen. But keep in mind that probably wouldn't have been a problem for most people playing this game. Basically, the alternate control scheme uses the face buttons as a second D-pad for your camera controls, which sounds horrible, and it is. But to compensate, they give you super aim assist when you aim with the left trigger, like basically locking directly onto an enemy even if you were aiming 4 feet away. But despite all of this game is easily the most ambitious of all the DS Call of Duty so far, only rivaled by World at War, but that game didn't have zombies in it. So let's get into what this game does well. First of all, they actually tried with the story this time. You even get cutscenes, and best of all, this story takes place in the same universe as the mainline Call of Duty game. I think anyway. Mason is in it, although you never actually meet him. Basically, it's a side story of the CIA trying to find the Nova gas, which was the big scary weapon in BO1, but failing miserably, as if you played that game you know the bad guys were minutes away from winning. It also really tries to give you a similar gameplay experience to the first Black Ops. Like, you get a helicopter section where you get to fly around and destroy outposts, you get a boat section where you get to man a giant gun, you get to escape from prison, play as a Russian guy, get interrogated by your superior, crawl through fox tunnels, and so on. Like, this game more than any other, except like I keep saying, maybe World at War, feels like they wanted to give people who didn't have a PS3 or Xbox a similar Call of Duty experience, and that's super admirable. I love that. Of course, you don't get the same experience, not even close, but what you do get is kinda cool. Zombies especially. Now, I completely forgot just how hard Zombies was in this game, but it was still super nostalgic to see these old maps again. There's 4 completely new maps to play on, and in case you're wondering, there's no Pack-a-Punch or Easter eggs, at least that we've found. Maybe they're out there. Anyway, you die in one hit from any zombie or hellhound at any round, so again, no gooch scratching. Zombies are also super tough, and some start running at about round 5, so I only made it like round 7 on my best run, but it was fun anyway. And indeed, you can shoot the power-ups to collect them, which I still forget isn't in Black Ops 1 to this day anytime I play it. Me and my brother used to play together back in the day, because unlike the greed-filled society we live in today, you could play DS games together without both having a copy of the game, and I honestly think we didn't make it much past round 7 ourselves. Anyway, I really can't complain too much about Black Ops. Is it good? Certainly not, but I respect what they were going for here. And it kind of makes me wonder about the quality of the next and final game in this series. I do remember liking the gameplay of this one more than Black Ops, so we'll see if I eat those words or not. So for the last entry in the Call of Duty for the DS series, we luckily end on a very high note, probably the best made and most fun game out of any of them. Modern Warfare 3 Defiance takes a very similar route as Black Ops did, that being telling a side story within the main Modern Warfare timeline, that realistically didn't need to be told, but it is still fun to play. For this game, they pretty much abandoned the difficulty they started with Mobilized in favor of it being much more like what we saw in MW1 and World at War, but unlike those, it's actually very mechanically competent. So while the game is super fun, it's also super easy. Like, I probably died half as many times as I did in any other game, and the times I did die were usually due to this. To compensate for the very easy gameplay, they made some of these objectives ball-blisteringly hard. Like, not hard because of the enemies, usually just because there's some super small time limit or window you have to do something within. Like, for example, destroy planes on a runway before they take off, or right at the end, kill 2 enemies with RPGs, grab their RPG, then shoot down a fleeing helicopter all within like a 15-second window. Like, it's not hard in a fun way, you know? But those moments are pretty rare, and the rest of the game is really good. Like, I have almost no complaints. The gunplay is amazing, your squad mates aren't stupid, and there's a good variety of missions. This one even has stealth missions. Now, Black Ops also had them, but they were kinda bad, which is why stealth was never required in that game. In this one, they're still not really that great, but the devs felt confident enough in them to make staying hidden required for a couple sections in this game. Basically, this game takes place in between MW2 and 3, when Russia was actively conducting a ground invasion of the USA. This game is like a series of missions run by the National Guard and some British blokes who were there for training, pushing back the Russians from Alaska, Nevada, and Baltimore. Just like those parts of MW2 and 3, it's just super fun, and I know it sounds a little psychotic, but it's really fun to me to just like fight your way through a suburb or like hoover dam. Now this game does either just assume you know what's going on in the main story that made Russia want to invade the US, or just doesn't care that you know. Either one is fair because the premise of fighting Russians on American soil would be enticing enough for most people anyway. But I've always thought this plotline was really interesting because on one hand, no matter what's going on behind the scenes, if someone is invading your country, you're going to want those people dead. But on the other hand, Russia currently believes the US carried out a terrorist attack, killing hundreds of civilians at an airport, in addition to later assassinating the Russian president, neither of which are exactly true, but it's like, if you could ever have a valid reason to invade somebody, that might be it. But also, fuck you for invading my country. So either way, it's a great premise to get you engaged in the story. This game also has the factor of actually being an all-out war, which almost no Call of Duties have besides World at War. It's just sick as fuck compared to the usual covert special ops they have you running in these games. Anyway, my only real gripe with this game comes from the alternate mission styles. This time around we have 0 turret sections, which is good, a tank section, which was great, sniper sections, which honestly kinda suck, and worst of all, 2 whole AC-130 missions, the second of which was exceptionally ass. Now listen, AC-130 missions have a nice little zing to them every once in a while, like they're unique and somewhat kinda fun when you play them like once a year or two. However, 2 in one game is just way too many. That's in addition to a section which is basically another AC-130 mission where you play as a recon drone guiding a team past enemies like that part in the console version of Black Ops 1. Which is crazy that I'm saying that because almost no one except for me would hear you reference Black Ops 1 and have to think to themselves, do they mean the console or the DS version? Anyway, this game is good. If you were going to play any COD game for the DS, I'd probably recommend this one. Although I would say others like Black Ops or Mobilized were a little more inspired. Whether that's a good thing or not is up to you to decide, but I can respect trying to innovate, which this game doesn't do. Anyway, damn man, those were 5 Call of Duty games for the Nintendo DS, and now that I've played them all, I have to say, I think I was probably too harsh on Modern Warfare and World at War at the start. Back when I played those games, I was still kind of loathing the control scheme, whereas by the time I played Black Ops, I actively chose it over an alternate one. It's been an interesting journey for me, a lot of fun moments, a lot of not so fun moments, but now for the most important question, which one was my favorite? Based on my glazing, you might think it would be Modern Warfare 3, but hell nah, I fucking loved Modern Warfare Mobilized. Is it perfect? Hell no. But honestly, I thought the weird uptick in difficulty was super fun, and it made me play way more thoughtfully than I usually would in a Call of Duty game. Thank you all so much for watching.